We start now the conference with the first session by a keynote speaker.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Emoocs 2017. Welcome again to University Carlos III of Madrid. My name is Eva Méndez, and I have the tremendous honor today to introduce you to our two first speakers to this plenary keynote session, Sir Timothy O'Shea and Javier Hernández Ros. Our first keynote speaker, Sir Timothy O'Shea, is currently the Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Edinburgh, one of the world's top universities, consistently ranked in the world top 50, currently ranked 19th in the QS World University Rankings. Professor O'Shea is a famous computer scientist who has worked in a range of educational technology research and development projects. He has an amazing CV. Probably some of you have read one of his 10 books, like Learning and Teaching with Computers or In Order to Learn. He has been principal of the University of Edinburgh for the last 15 years. And under his leadership in the last 5 years, the University of Edinburgh has developed 35 Moocs in different platforms, Coursera, FutureLearn, and EDX, having more than 2 million learners. I listened to Professor O'Shea in November 2010 in this university in Getafe campus, and I posed you a question. I don't remember what my question was about, but I do really remember that I said to you, congratulations, Professor O'Shea, for your inspiring talk and your successful university. I'm sure that today, after his talk, I will say the same, because he will for sure inspire us from the experience and the research undertaken around the Moocs in University of Edinburgh and the strategies for deploying Moocs in higher education. What is he going to talk about in his presentation? Sir, the stage is yours. Thank you very much for coming.
Good morning. A tremendous pleasure to be here, indeed. And I'm speaking twice. I'm speaking this morning at this wonderful conference, and then I'm speaking on Wednesday at the Open edX conference. And because we're doing quite a lot of work at Edinburgh, I thought the simple division I would make is today I will focus mostly on Moocs, but there is quite an interaction between our Moocs and our online masters, and I shall mention some of that. But today I will focus mostly on Moocs, and then when I talk again on Wednesday, I will focus mostly on the online masters. So this talk this morning, I'll start by talking a little bit about our Mooc data, and then when I talk on Wednesday, I'll start on the online data. I'll give you a very heterogeneous set of case studies. And what I did in preparation for this talk and for the talk on Wednesday is I contacted the leaders of all the Moocs in Edinburgh and of all the online courses. So that's quite a lot. The number has gone up a little bit. We're heading towards about 50 Moocs now at Edinburgh, and we're heading towards about 80 online masters. So I will give you some brief commentaries of a section of those that I found most interesting. I've got much too many slides this morning, so I shall go through, I shall pick out some, but have the others available to go back for the Q&A. A particular thing that we're doing in Edinburgh that I would want to emphasize is teacher bots. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm also interested in innovative practice. Are we doing new things? And for myself, I did my doctorate in this area 47 years ago I started my doctorate in e-learning, so I've been working in this area for quite a while. And so what I'm going to do is pick out some examples of innovative practice, and preparing this talk I was very happy because certainly in the Edinburgh world I found 20 things that we've done in the last 3 years which seem to me quite innovative, so I will summarize those for you. Talk a bit about, briefly about how MOOCs can be used in a hybrid mode, and again, as I was introduced, the notion of using MOOCs in the conventional setting. Provide a little taxonomy, and then there'll be some conclusions, and because I'm at the head of a university, there will be very optimistic conclusions, because heads of university have to be optimistic. It's in our job description. So here's a data summary, a bit crowded, but more than 2 million people have now engaged in our MOOCs in a serious way. We deliberately use all 3 of the main MOOC platforms. We use Coursera, we use edX, we use FutureLearn. We also do quite a lot of things which are built not using conventional MOOC platforms, but using things like Blackboard Learn. So deliberately diverse. Quite a large community. We have about 250 staff. I used to be able to make this joke that said, you know, we were in every country in the world apart from a couple of small ones and apart from 2 odd ones, the 2 odd ones being North Korea and the Vatican City. But our latest data shows we are in every country in the world, including we have learners in North Korea, and we have a learner in the Vatican City as well. But that is our data, and I guess the key point is for the University of Edinburgh, this is a comprehensive activity. It is done across the piece. It is done. And this data summary obviously comes from 2012. We moved into MOOCs. We started building MOOCs relatively recently, 4 years ago. We have quite an elaborate, I'm not expecting you, although you can obviously send for the slides, and we have a very nice booklet. We have quite an elaborate mechanism for producing MOOCs. This is the first half of it. There is a central bidding process. Work is done at the outset on marketing, on presentation, on platform choice, and there is a very strong quality assurance component. And possibly because a large part of my career, 19 years of my career was in the British Open University, I'm very used to the idea of central quality control, central support, and also very used to the idea of central teams. So we have quite an elaborate mechanism there. Coming on then to MOOCs, our first 6 MOOCs, we chose 2 in the arts and humanities, 2 in medicine and veterinary medicine, and 2 in science. For the University of Edinburgh, perhaps not surprisingly, by far our most successful thing has been in philosophy. Very large numbers. Our introduction to philosophy is the most popular MOOC ever in Coursera. It's not the most popular MOOC ever, because the most popular MOOC ever is on FutureLearn, and it's the Open University's MOOC on learning English as a second language. So the phrase is very careful. The most popular MOOC ever in Coursera. Edinburgh, as a university, culturally is famous for its contributions to philosophy. It was the University of David Hume. It was the University Adam Smith lectured in. Many of the Enlightenment philosophers were either based at Edinburgh or visited, so perhaps it's not too surprising for us. But we were very, very positively surprised by how well received our introduction to philosophy MOOC went. I think the great success of that had a big impact then in the arts and humanities moving into MOOCs. And it then generated a second MOOC, Philosophy and the Sciences. That was very successful. A feature of many of our MOOCs, and it's very clear in the Philosophy of Sciences one, is they're highly interdisciplinary. So all the presentations in philosophy and science have both a philosopher and a scientist engaged. So So that was our second MOOC in philosophy, also very successful. And I asked all the teams I was talking to, all the MOOC teams and all the online learning teams, to comment on their platforms. And on some of the slides, you'll get some examples of commentary. This is fairly typical commentary. It says Coursera is really easy to use. So this is philosophers, not computer scientists talking. It gives a wide reach. They were pleased with the big range of people. The editing is quite limited. They don't really like the overtone that, because the emphasis in philosophy was so much on access. The overtone from Coursera on paying, they didn't really like. But I'll make the general summary. The general summary on platforms is, of all the different platforms we use, no platform is found to be impossibly bad. So if you imagine it as TripAdvisor or such, nobody says Coursera or FutureLearn or edX or Blackboard is impossibly bad. At the same time, nobody says any platform is impossibly, wonderfully perfect either. They have reservations. Typically, the reservations about platforms are to do with what else you connect with. How easy is it to import other software? How easy is it to point to other different types of systems? I didn't know what the result would be, contacting these 50 MOOC teams and this 80 online. I was interested to see if there would be a very strong plus on one of the platforms or a very strong minus, but I didn't find that. I found what you would say in English a curate's egg, a mix. People were generally mostly happy about their platforms, but nobody thought any platform was perfect. What has happened since with the philosophy MOOCs is we have a MOOC on intellectual humility, and we have another MOOC on philosophy, science, and religion. So we now have a family of 4 MOOCs, and if you are hearing me on Wednesday, you will discover that these 4 MOOCs have generated textbooks, they have generated big grants, and they have generated 2 online masters. So this is a particular pattern of development where we started with 1 very successful MOOC in philosophy. It generated 3 more MOOCs, but this has also generated books, successful books, it's generated grant funding, and now it's generated. And in this case, the move was starting with the MOOC and moving through the MOOC to the textbook to the online masters. But we have other examples of where we started with the masters and then took a bit of it for the MOOC. But for Edinburgh, philosophy has been the big success. One example of success is that we now have a very successful online masters in history with enrollment of more than 100. I don't think it wouldn't have mattered what I said to the historians. It was the fact that they could see the philosophers being so successful with the MOOCs that made the historians move there. So that is a nice one for us. Another very nice one is astrobiology. It's a very good subject. It's one that people are extremely interested in. You have very good, in terms of public science, citizen science, you have good resources for doing astrobiology. Really very successful. One of the surprises for us is we now have a student astrobiology society. So this is a strange, as it were, evolutionary development. You start with a MOOC, which is targeted at people outside the university all around the world. But the physics and the biology students inside the university see the MOOC outside the university, and then they create their own study pattern. So I was very pleased to see that astrobiology had reached outside, and also it reached out to quite a number of older people, and they're quite nice examples of access. I should have mentioned that our philosophy MOOC has really good access amongst school students. So astrobiology, older people like it as a hobby, because you can get the data, you can go and look for nitrogen and hydrogen, you can try and look for life on other planets yourself. Again, we've had a book out of it. But here's the most surprising piece of outreach. So lots of different surprises for me. This MOOC on astrobiology has been very successfully used in education in prisons. That is, we're very interested in outreach. We're very interested in the notion that if you give prisoners constructive educational tasks, when they leave prison, they are less likely to commit crimes again. They are more likely to be well rehabilitated. So I think education in prisons is a good cause. It's not a new one. The Open University was always very strong on education in prisons. But we found of the different things that we are doing, one that moved very easily into the prison world was astrobiology. So the prisoners could do this, they could get the data, they could start participating. And of course, astrobiology involves using real astronomical data to predict the possibility. And then this has now turned into a very nice project on what would a space station in Mars be like, and what could its relationship with prison be like. So a very interesting educational project which will have tangible outcomes. There will be a book called The Prison Population on the Human Space Settlement. It's a surprising question to ask, but there it is. And to my surprise, somebody who started as an astrobiologist, I persuaded the astrobiologist to make a MOOC, and he is now publishing in the Journal of Correctional Education, that he is publishing in a journal focused at people who do prison education. So another really quite nice example for us, some nice innovations. This is an area where we've been doing quite a lot of stuff. We had a MOOC on the EU referendum. We had a MOOC on the US presidential election. We had a MOOC on the Scottish independence referendum. We had a MOOC on the last British general election. The interesting thing about these MOOCs, one of the things that is innovative about them, is that the people teaching do not know what the answer is going to be. So the people, for example, on the EU referendum, the people who were teaching on it, they were not expecting a leave answer. They really were not. They were very confident that British people would vote Remain, which is also what the polls were telling. So that meant that they had to really start working very, very hard when the answer was known. And up to the answer, they had very, very nice things like videos, interviews, interactive elements. But the thing, if you look at the top right, the thing that they invented was an interactive Brexit Twitter tracker. So for their students, they helped their students track all the tweets there were about the referendum, and then they were discussing them. And that was quite interesting because actually our University of Edinburgh students were then a bit ahead of most people and most political commentators, because when you used the interactive Brexit Twitter tool, you saw, to your surprise, there were very many more tweets for Leave than for Remain. So that is a tool that made a group of political scientists, gave them a bit more knowledge, but it was invented for the purposes of this course, and of course this for the purposes of the course we're talking about doing something in real time where the political scientists who are teaching it don't know what the answer is going to be. And again, a mixed bag with all of the, I'm not going to go into these at any length. In a way, the commentaries are very similar, but you know, the Future Learn certainly worked as the platform for this. It wasn't perfect. And some of the ways the comments broke it up were unhelpful. We've been very successful in we're very strong on music, strong in the teaching of music. That has worked very well and has been steadily building. And we're now asking questions. A particular question we're asking in Edinburgh is we have a music program that is under intense demand. Edinburgh is a place people would really like to study music, they would really like to study performance. So we're asking ourselves the question, could the MOOC be used as an admissions tool? Because the MOOC has a performance element, because one of the things that the student is doing is learning how to read scores and how to play their musical instrument according to that. So nice that we're working in music. We have done a lot of veterinary stuff. We heard one about the truth of cats and dogs. What is the cat saying when it's purring? What is a dog saying when it's wagging its tail? I mean, for us, one of the interesting things about this is we've been doing online postgraduate teaching in veterinary science for about 15 years. So the MOOCs here these are the small subsets of things that we are already doing online. We sort of correctly know that people are interested in cats and dogs. There are a lot of people, so that we take advantage of that. And there we build a community. Here's one that ought to appeal. We decided to teach programming, to teach the programming language Scratch. Our starting point was Uruguay. I don't know if you know this, but in terms of secondary school, or not secondary school, in terms of school computing, the most advanced country in the world is Uruguay. It has successfully achieved 1 laptop per child, and one of the things on that laptop is the programming language Scratch. So what we decided to do, with some help from the Bank Santander, is we produced a Programar, which is a MOOC on programming in Scratch in Spanish. And then we thought it would be silly not to do it in English, so we then translated it into English. And then we found we had something quite interesting. We had this nice introduction to programming, these nice metaphors, like making a sandwich for putting your program together, was successful. But it also allowed us we use social network analysis quite a lot. We could answer the question, what is a group of learners learning Scratch in Spanish and their interactions? How are they different from a group of people learning Scratch in English? And one way they're different is the Spanish learners engage in about 3 times more communication interactions than the English learners. So it's not a little bit different if you're learning Scratch in Spanish with other people who speak Spanish. It really, if you do the social network analysis, it is dramatically different. Interestingly, the learning outcomes aren't very different, but the pattern that the learners engage with each other is very, very different. So that's an interesting thing. And I'm very keen that we do more MOOCs done in different languages, because that allows one to make some really nice cultural comparisons. And again, Coursera, not perfect. Coursera is a bit problematic to get the data, because for us it's very important to compare the research data, but it's certainly doable in Coursera. This one is extremely relevant to yesterday, Understanding Football. A very successful MOOC on understanding football. Anybody want to guess which country in the world is it? This is very unusual in terms of country interest. Which country in the world, I mean, you would think Scotland would be very interested in this because we're so bad at football. Or maybe Spain or Italy would be interested because they're so good at football. But any guesses which country did the football MOOC be most successful in? India. India, obviously, good understanding of cricket. Soccer is really quite new to India, but it is being promoted very actively in India. So we found a surprising audience we weren't expecting in India. Here's another innovative MOOC. This is to do with making people physically fit. So this is a MOOC that if you do it, you inevitably find yourself, the first thing the MOOC tells you is stand up. It's a very bossy MOOC. It gives you instructions. And it gives you instructions about how to become more physically fit. And it has been really quite successful. And it relates, we have another MOOC on global challenges, and one of the things that is interesting me, this MOOC on global challenges, it's to do with critical thinking. You would think it would be very different, and in some ways it is extremely different from the physically active MOOC. An interesting thing about this MOOC, the critical thinking, is like the astrobiology MOOC, it is used in prisons. It is used to teach prisoners a particular form of critical thinking that also allows one to reflect on things, but it links across to the physically active MOOC as well, because one of the 4 themes it has is understanding obesity. Statistics is a hard thing to understand. At Edinburgh, we think it's extremely important to understand, because we're the university that educated Thomas Bayes. Without Bayes' law, Google wouldn't work. Almost any work with large data wouldn't work. So we have a very nice course here. And one of the problems that they had to confront is you're trying to teach statistics, and I don't know if any of you have ever taught statistics. My first teaching experience, which was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, was to teach statistics to civil engineers. It was really heartbreaking. I went to the head of mathematics and I said, this is impossible. These engineers don't really understand equations. They're all going to fail. And the head of engineering said, the head of mathematics said, of course they'll fail. The engineers always fail the statistics course. Statistics is surprisingly, the theory underlying it is surprisingly difficult. It's very hard to do. So what the statisticians in Edinburgh have done is they've produced some very nice interactive applets, where when you're exploring things like normal distribution or small sample statistics, there are these very nice simulations which do not require you to understand. And these interactive applets have been plugged on to the MOOC and have, in their own right, become very successful. And of course we have to do marketing, everybody has to do marketing, but it has been actually a very positive experience doing the marketing MOOC. It's gone around the world. It is a nice course because it's quite informal, it has quite good use of cartoons, informal diagrams, very good use of companies, and it's particularly related to 6 startup companies really very nicely. One I was especially pleased with, which to my surprise came from the vet school, and maybe that's because the veterinary school has such a long history of working online, but we have a digital footprint MOOC. That is a MOOC to help you understand how you are seen in the world through your use of Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn and such. Very interesting idea. So a MOOC, and obviously, for us, a MOOC to help us understand how we're seen through our MOOCs. And that has trundled on, built up a community. In Edinburgh, we have various festivals. We have a book festival, where one of the things in it is a literary competition. We have the oldest, the University of Edinburgh gives out the oldest literary prize for books in the English language. The Prix Goncourt in France is older, but we're the second oldest. And there is some excitement because there is a short list, and then the students get to vote, and then there's a choice of a winner. And now we're going to have a MOOC where people will be taught the idea of the high-level ideas of reading, and they'll be able to participate. And again, like some of the others, they will not know the answer. There will be 6 books in particular they will focus on, but they do not know until the result of the competition which will be judged best and why. Very interested in using MOOCs to do with place. We recruited from the Open University somebody extremely good, Jonathan Silvertown. His iSpot project started and still works very well on looking at flora and fauna. And if you're looking at plants or butterflies or animals, you need to have a sense of place for that. So that is very powerful. It also uses networks. This is a picture of a network of one person working there. But for us, it's now allowed us to move into MOOCs that have a sense of place, but for history, for example, the things that, so it isn't just flora and fauna, it's for history, it's for geology, what sorts of, and such are there too. And we are increasingly now seeing MOOCs for credit, that is, for regular University of Edinburgh credit. Again, this is an example where we started with the online masters. We have a very successful online masters in digital education, which I'll talk a bit more about on Wednesday. But one of the things it's done is it's spawned a MOOC on social methods. We have another MOOC for credit on trauma and resilience. And it's interesting to me that such a very demanding subject can be used, and it involves the use of Skype incorporated into the MOOC. Very challenging, but again, like the other one, it is real university credit from the MOOC that would contribute to your university postgraduate degree. I think the most exciting general innovation at Edinburgh are the teacher bots, led by Sean Bain, covering a whole range of things. And when you're dealing, obviously, with MOOC populations, which is in the case of philosophy, might be 100,000, but even MOOC populations of 1,000, then the more that you can provide appropriate automation. And like people at other places, like Georgia Tech, we are discovering that the combination of careful analysis and Bayesian statistics, once you've got 100,000 learners, then your automated interventions can be really quite reliable and maybe even more accurate than an experienced or a partially experienced tutor. So the teacher bot is certainly worth thinking about. We're very interested, there is this idea of Boston X. We're very interested in the idea of Edinburgh X. So we are producing different applications based on Edinburgh is a city which has had lots and lots of famous writers. So, recently J.K. Rowling or Sandy McCall Smith, but historically Thomas Carlyle or Robert Louis Stevenson or Conan Doyle. So we have a very nice thing in Edinburgh where, as you go round, it tells you which murder or which romance or whatever happened at this location in which novel. Edinburgh has a surprising density of literary history, which we get from it. So innovative practice then. So I'm going to tell you about 20 examples, which I mostly have mentioned, not all of them. Real-time delivery, we've seen that in quite a lot of places. Time zone scheduling, so students are grouped together according to which time zone they're in. Location awareness I've talked about. Interactive applets, interactive Twitter, physical activity. Haven't really talked about slow reveals. Some MOOCs are very keen not to tell too much too quickly. And they have a problem with platforms that allow the MOOC learner to easily skim forward. That is, we have a MOOC, for example, on the Higgs boson, which doesn't want people to try to run to the end to understand it, because they know that for most people this will be too hard. They really want them to spend the 7 weeks, week by week, building up the knowledge. Embedded research, a lot of particularly in digital education, but not only, a lot of the stuff we're doing does involve researching about things. Astrobiology is an example. The students can do real astrobiology research using real astronomy data, and they do. The prisons is a nice surprise. TeacherBot is a nice surprise. When one thinks about MOOCs, one thinks about things that are very popular around the world, but some of the colleagues say, but you can also do things which are actually quite hard, which have a tiny population when you're dealing with such a big worldwide population. So the Higgs boson, we don't expect very many people to seriously want to understand the Higgs boson, but in MOOC world there's certainly enough. Aligning social media, very important. How is Facebook used by the MOOC learners? And of course, this may not be visible to the MOOC. Or how is Twitter? Interdisciplinary teams. I've talked about families of MOOCs. In philosophy, we have 4 MOOCs in a very definite family. But that family of MOOCs also reaches out to the critical thinking MOOCs. Very community orientation, MOOCs about digital media like the footprint, social network analysis, a very interesting, very powerful thing for us to look at the different ways. And I'll talk more about how you can use social network analysis, for example, to notice Dragan Grašević has some interesting work of you can see these clusters of people in different locations who submit their MOOC assignments within a few minutes of each other, quite reliably. It does therefore seem extremely likely that they're working together in some social media where they come to some shared agreement about what the answer to the assignment is. And so you can do quite a lot with social network analysis. MOOCs for credit. And well, people talk about the middle of the MOOC pattern, and a lot of our MOOC learners are 25 to 35. We have got some surprisingly young and some surprisingly old, depending on the topic, like young people coming into philosophy, old people coming into astrobiology. Just to point out that MOOCs don't stand alone. You can see them with the campus, with peer groups, with open source. Big surprise to me is how often MOOCs are generating and coexisting with textbooks. So MOOCs are not killing textbooks in Edinburgh. MOOCs are generating new textbooks. We have more, particularly introduction to philosophy, introduction to philosophy, introduction to astrobiology, more textbooks that exist as a result of the MOOCs. Some people predicted that MOOCs would drive textbooks away. We see the reverse. See the interaction of MOOCs with Facebook, with Twitter, and obviously you see the interaction of the philosophy MOOC with the critical thinking MOOC. If you look at a MOOC, you can say, is it massive? Or some of our MOOCs are actually quite small. That doesn't make them not valuable. Are they open or closed? Are they attempting something universal, like what does it mean to be, or something very niche? Are they really focused for groups? Astrobiology is so suited to group work, so suited to breaking the task. You take the nitrogen, I'll take the hydrogen. You take this galaxy, I'll take that galaxy. Are we using open source? A lot of the Edinburgh work would be characterized as a very strong commitment to open source. A lot of the stuff we do, but some of it is proprietary. Some of it involves Blackboard Learn. Is it for interest or award bearing? Is it for understanding, like the philosophy MOOC, or is it for competency, like the marketing MOOC? Is it for cohort, or is it for most of our MOOCs work well with cohorts? I would say in Edinburgh there's a lack of enthusiasm for random entry, both in terms of how we manage it and the benefit of peer learning. The general feeling in Edinburgh would be very much for cohorts. So conclusions. At Edinburgh, some heads of universities say, gosh, how can you get people to do this? My difficulty is finding enough money for all the people who want to. There is tremendous enthusiasm for reaching extraordinary innovation. I've mentioned 20 innovations that I could easily find by asking colleagues. A lot of reflective practice. MOOCs for us have been a driver for access. Access from the community at large, from prisons, from schools, a great driver for reputation. We've seen this very nice pattern. The MOOCs generate a manuscript. The MOOCs and the manuscript then generate a master's course. Very, very pleasing. A real diversity of technologies. And I was trying to think, looking at the different commentary, and you'll understand I did this really mad thing, which is I emailed about 130 people, or 130, well, I didn't email 130 people, I emailed 130 teams. And I was wondering, as I was finishing this slide, what was the commonality? But an observation that I saw in a lot of the emails was what a nice size the MOOC was. That it was not scary like trying to do a postgraduate course. It was not tiny like trying to do a video. It was a nice size to try to explain a few important ideas in physics or a few important ideas in astrobiology. So there was that. Here is some credits. I've been talking. I'm a parasite. We all know heads of universities are parasites. I'm a parasite. I'm a parasite on the work of all of these people and all of these people. So, and I'm sure I will have missed people out, but this is, as updated this morning, all the people I'm aware sent me emails that were used somewhere in this talk. And I suppose it is quite a nice way of demonstrating that the University of Edinburgh has a really large community. So I think I have been disciplined. I've been fairly disciplined. I've talked for 2 minutes more than I'm supposed to, so you've got 8 minutes of question time left. Very happy to take questions. I'm an Irish German. Ich war in Hamburg geboren, but I look Irish and I sound. So I'm very happy with questions of the form "you're wrong," or I'm very happy with questions that are extremely pedantic in nature. I can be both argumentative and pedantic with ease. So disagreement, pedantic points, or profound questions are all welcome. Thank you. Please, quick question there. Yeah, the microphone is coming. Do say who you are and where you're from.
Auerbonn, and I speak to the one half of you, which is German. I'm from Heidelberg University.
Oh, wie schön.
I have just a very curious remark. It looks like from your slides there that the gender balance of the teachers tends towards the female gender. Is that so?
That's a very acute observation. That's true. And that doesn't represent the gender balance of the staff in the university. Also, our students, I mean, Edinburgh has now many more female students than male students, but that is a very perceptive observation. And thank you for saying that. And now, next time I do this, you see, it's nicer if I can say than a colleague from Heidelberg has observed. But it's, yeah. But this is just, these are exactly the people who emailed me. Okay.
Hello, my name is Rui Ribeiro. I work at FCCN in Portugal, and we are trying to start a national-wide MOOC platform. You talked about your team and your big team and your 50 MOOCs or more. Mm-hmm. And I need to know how big is your team and how fast do they do MOOCs? So what is the size?
What is the size? Well, in terms of the immediate support team would not be very big. But the community overall in Edinburgh that is engaged, if we go... We'll be there in a moment. Just want to... It's about 250 people actively engaged, and... No, it's going to take me a little while, gosh. Didn't realize I had quite so many slides. Here we are. So engaged in an individual MOOC, there will be sort of professionals who will give advice about the platform. There will be professionals who will do the video. There will be professionals who will give advice about the forms of assessment that you might use. And then there will be academic specialists. And I don't know if it's because myself and the other key person who is leading this, Jeff Hayward, was the vice principal. We both had an open university background, so our natural working assumption would always be that for any MOOC you would have a team. But the team, a lot of the people in the team are only in it part-time. They're in there to give a bit of advice about assessment, a bit of advice about the video, and then they're doing other things.
So you don't have a core team that supports all the courses throughout, from start to the finish?
That's right. It has developed, and it's a very happy surprise to me, it has developed very much as a community of enthusiasts who ask for relatively small amounts of resources, put in their own time, and then we have this quite elaborate process which offers extremely good support that we take them through.
Okay, so the last question is, you have all these, you use Coursera, edX, and so on, and you have these courses that are massive at the end. You said that you had some issues with some platforms, and my question here is about your business model. do you foresee, when you start to MOOC from these groups and you go to Coursera and you have to pay for it to start over, are you always sure that you are going to be successful, or the university doesn't really care about the outcome?
Well, we're not sure we're always going to be successful. I mean, our MOOCs, and for that matter, our online masters, in terms of enrolled students and completing students, they vary in some orders of magnitude. I mean, for us, at the moment, this is still quite a heuristic process. Nobody imagined philosophy would be, for example, even though it's an absolute core part of the University of Edinburgh, nobody imagined that philosophy would be by far our most successful enterprise. So for us, we're still trying to see, and then trying to see how to build on it. And I guess for us, what success looks like would be philosophy, where philosophy is 4 MOOCs, some very good books, some grants from outside bodies, and 2 online masters. That is clearly success. That is self-sustaining. That'll generate enough fee income for itself. Obviously, what will not be successful, is a MOOC that has a small enrollment and then went through random entry starts dropping. One sort of knows that's going to go away again. But it's, the university has 20 schools. My objective was for every school in the university to have non-trivial presence. 19 of the 20 schools of the university now do have non-trivial presence. Yeah.
John Zornig from the University of Queensland. You mentioned earlier that you have a central bidding process. What's your selection criteria, and have they changed over time? There's
basically 2 selection criteria. There is a commitment to being comprehensive. So if some part of the university that has never done a MOOC or an online master's comes and says, we would really like to do this, we're going to work very hard to say yes. Because partly what I see myself as doing is educating and enthusing the professors. So the moment the historians who had no track record said, oh, look at what the philosophers are doing, we'd like to do an online master's in history, he immediately said yes, go, absolutely wonderful, go for that. When the request then comes from an area which has already done a lot of stuff, then the question is, well, what is the level of interest? The other slightly harder question is, well, you've done a lot of this, why can't you pay for this one yourself? We have a very mixed economy in Edinburgh. There's things I pay for, there's things the school pays for, there's things the department pays for, there's things, the academic donates their time or doesn't. So there are different ways of making things happen. But I would say at the moment we are transitioning in Edinburgh from a position where we're really trying to get everybody to do a bit to now a position where we want to really build on the successful bit, the very successful bits. And in fairness to the next speaker, I should stop now, entirely punctual, having used exactly you see, this is the German, not the Irish or the Spanish. The German stops after 45 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Oshie. Actually, the next question was mine, and I'm the microphone, scared. Now, I want to say you again, congratulations for your inspiring talk, and thank you very much. I have again the pleasure to introduce you our next keynote speaker, Javier Hernández Ros, who is head of the Unit of Data Application and Creativity in the European Commission DG CONNECT, and from July last year, he is also the acting director of the Data Directorate. He joined in the European Commission 30 years ago, and since then he has been engaged with digital transformation and innovation. The Data Directorate's objective is to unlock the potential of the data as an economy driver for prosperity and social well-being, and the Unit G2 that he leads covers a range of activities, including funding leading-edge ICT research and innovation and policies. I met Javier Hernández Ros 5 years ago in the context of Europeana, the biggest European Commission's endeavor to digitize and to share an open cultural heritage to the society. And I have always felt in his concern about how to open and reuse the cultural heritage content for education in order to promote creativity and essential assets for the society. But I think it's better if you listen to him than to me. So I will just give him the stage to let him talk about the opening up education from the perspective of the European Commission. Javier, thank you very much for being here.
So, good morning to all of you. Buenos días. It's a pleasure to be in Leganés and to be close to Madrid, my hometown. So thanks for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to address all of you today in this wonderful auditorium and in this very motivating work that the University Carlos III is doing on ICT technologies and learning. So it's really a pleasure to be here today and contributing a little bit to what you are going to be working in the next week. So I'm going to talk to you from the angle of the European Commission that comes from technology. So in the European Commission, when we are in the business of Emoocs from the angle of ICT applications. And we are doing most of our research work on these technologies. At the same time, there is another group of people in the Commission, that is the Directorate General for Education and Culture, who are responsible for education, and of course they are very much engaged on the Emoocs business. So at the end of the day, I mean, we're talking here about in a crossroads where education and digital merges, and traditionally we have been very much involved from the technology side in all this area, and of course we work with our colleagues about it. So let me talk you what I'm planning to tell you today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about where we see Emoocs in the general picture of the digital single market, which is the flagship initiative of the Commission on digital technologies. And then, of course, I will be talking to you a bit about the Emoocs, how we see Emoocs, the challenges, the opportunities, what we are doing in the Commission, and of course, we will be very keen to share with you what we should be doing in the future. So we will wrap up by a bit where we see things going, and we will be, of course, interested in listening from you. What should we be doing at European level to put things forward a little bit better? So that is the setting with one very important caveat, which is what does Europe do in education? So education is not a core competence of the European Union. You know very well that the European Union is regularly criticized, that we do too many things, and we get involved in too many things, and we should try to concentrate on less issues. Well, education is not one of our core competences. That is entirely national responsibility. So when we talk about how you have to set up the universities or schools, I mean, that is completely national. There is nothing at European level that deals with it. Our work comes only accompanying process, sharing experiences, sharing technologies, doing research work. So we are very much in that concept of cooperation and coordination work, but this is not a core competence of the Commission. So this is something which you need to take into place. So this is what we are going to be presenting, and I hope that at the end of the day you will have a really good image of what we are doing in the Commission and what we are trying to do in the Commission. So let me first of all talk to you about the digital single market. So the digital single market is really our big endeavor. So it's in a way the digital agenda of the European Union. It's one of the 7 flagships projects that the current Juncker Commission wants to implement, and is really adapting the single market that we have for the analog world to the digital world, which has proved to be extremely complex. So here we are talking about portability of content. If you buy legal content in one place, can I bring it forward to another country? Well, today, you have all of you experience that if you try to do that, you have your geolocalization thing that tells you that this content is not available on the other country. Well, we are working towards bringing those barriers down. So we are working about copyright and a new copyright laws that will underpin a much more shareability and portability of content. We are talking about connectivity. We are talking about all areas that you can think of in order to create this digital single market. Of course, roaming. I mean, you know that we are all getting all these messages that on the 15th of June, roaming is over. So I don't know you here, but in my contract in Luxembourg, as from the 15th of June, I will have one European Union territory. I can use all my megas anywhere. I can call anybody I want. It's completely independent whether I'm calling a telephone number in one country or another. So all that is the things that we are trying to do in the Commission in the digital single market. Of course, this is done in cooperation with the member states and the like. Now, when we come into this issue of the digital single market, one of the issues we are, of course, looking at is at skills. And we are looking at skills, and we are especially looking at skills from the ICT world, but you could apply it to other worlds. And we clearly see here that the demand of ICT specialists is going to be huge in the future. And we are talking about that there might even be 825 shortage of skills person that the current labor market is not providing. So you see there are huge opportunities for jobs, a huge opportunity for Emoocs, and a huge opportunity to train our workforce to what are the things we reach in demand. Of course, we don't know what will be the professions of the future, and we don't know how people will have to be reskilled in the future. But we have some trends and we have some ideas. And there you have some areas in which we have to really be working off. Now, recently, in the 10th of May, we have taken we have published 2 weeks ago the midterm review on the digital single market that we started 2 years ago. Now we have put on the table all the legal provisions. They are currently being discussed by the Parliament and by the Council. So this deals about a new copyright law, a new audiovisual media services directive that regulates all the broadcasting, and now there's big issues around social networks and about broadcasting versus Netflix. I mean, all these laws are now currently being discussed in Parliament and Council, and we hope that they will be approved soon, and that we will have a new legal setting in Europe. Of course, one of the things that the review says is that we need substantial additional investment in digital skills and infrastructures and technologies. So we know already that that is there. One of the interesting things we do in the Commission is that we publish annually what we call the Digital Economy and Society Index that looks at how member states behave. So if you go over there, you can find your country in Europe and see where you are. And we try to capture there all sorts of issues that are around connectivity, human capital, the use of the internet, the integration of digital technology. So we have lots of areas in which we are working. And you see that there is a huge amount of work to be done. If we look at the human capital, part of that index, that deals with many issues, but it will deal how the population is digitally cultured, so how many people have got basic skills or not, how many people are digital professionals, and I mean, you will find out that the work to be done still is huge. So, I mean, I really encourage that, for example, 44% of Europeans do not have still digital skills. We have still a huge amount of lack of professionals. I mean, people graduates in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics still are very, very few for what we need to do and the job professions that we need for the future. So really, again, here, with all these, let's say, macro figures, you can already conclude what are the huge opportunities that education and digital education and MOOCs can play in all these challenges. So, it's quite clear that we need to work in all these areas, and let me now look a little bit of what the Commission is doing in the angle of education. So we work on policy work, trying to do a bit of coordination of what we are doing or what the member states are doing. So we call those, normally those are communications that we issue. Then we underpin the work with some research programs. So we have been funding and supporting some important research programs. And in that respect, of course, the role of education is important. And we have also been doing some works trying to promote initiatives at the European level on the importance of ICT skills. So we launched the Grand Coalition for Skills and Jobs, putting together universities and big enterprises. We also launched the idea of a European Code Week, trying to get all schools and universities to dedicate 1 week to teach code to the children. So we try to use the momentum we can have at European level in order to really focus on some key issues that we think are a must for the future and that we think that request the attention of everybody involved. In 2013, we published a communication for me to explain to you. It's a policy document. So basically, the Commission takes a look at a topic, at an issue, in this case, education, and basically tries to set up what it believes is the problems and the challenges at stake, and proposes solutions or way forwards. And this has the general objective of launching a political debate and trying to create a bit trying to create momentum along several areas of work. We do that, of course, with the stakeholders community. We do it with universities. But I think these documents that we produce in the Commission, they have the value of trying to signal where we should be going in the future together with the community. And they are very good opportunities for those that they are in the field to try to contribute, to associate themselves to them, and to contribute from the angle of designing where we are going, but at the same time also to implementing where we are going. So the Opening Up Education, of course, proposed a huge amount because it was about really how can digital technologies can help education at all levels. Last year, we also published another communication. It was our colleagues mainly from DG EAC. So it was also about improving and modernizing education at schools and the importance of school and early childhood education and up to university and the question of digital technologies also in schools and how we could be helping them on that. Of course, one thing is theory and the other one is practice. And what we see is that there is a big consensus of where we should be going. When it comes into implementation, the situation is quite different. So it's easier to say where to go than to really get there for many reasons, you know. So deployment is really one of the big issues at stake. And then we will be issuing soon again a new communication on higher education at schools, again on modernization. All these are documents that they are simply political documents that try to put a direction on where should we be going. And I insist they are not done by the European Commission on its own. We are doing that with all the communities that work with us in all this area. We have a huge amount of stakeholders meetings and the like in order to gather views from everybody at stake. So digital technologies in education, opportunities. I think that, I mean, all what I can say here is I'm preaching to the converted. So we all believe that digital tools and open resources can help provide high quality education for all at a low cost. So we are of course there allowing everybody wherever he lives to have access to the best courses in the world at a very low cost. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity that should be not left out. There is the issue around personalization education. That's another important topic. So, I mean, the courses can be targeted to the level of learning of the different students. So you can have huge opportunities to really adapt to the different levels of the students and in different ways. I think there is areas of research to be done in there. How can that be done? But again, the opportunities are there. Of course, teaching at scale, millions of students. We have seen the figures of the University of Edinburgh. They are absolutely incredible, that you have reached everybody, even in the Vatican and North Korea. So congratulations, really. One person in the Vatican, but if he's dressing in white, that would be an achievement. So really, really good. I mean, I think the opportunities of the MOOCs and of digital technologies are huge. Of course, we can be much more flexible. You can learn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is also the question that comes in all the reports and all the studies we do about education and skills in the future. You really have to have a competence of skills that you need continuously to be reskilled. So you need to think now about your core competences, but you also need to be trained on digital technologies, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. I mean, all these are the skills of the 21st century that you really the workforce need to be continuously reskilled. And again, I think that the digital technologies offer here a wonderful opportunities. So all those, of course, are the opportunities that we have on the table. Now, of course, then comes the question of what are the challenges? Is this working or is this not working? And in the surveys we have been doing, it says that deployment, of course, is a big issue. So I can give you several figures, but I mean, in essence, still 63% of 9-year-olds do not study at highly digitally equipped schools with appropriate equipment, broadband, and high connectivity. So connectivity still is a problem in schools. But of course, not only that, I mean, it's the capacity of teachers to adapt to the new pedagogical ways of teaching with digital technologies. Some teachers, of course, they more and more are skilled, but are they teaching using digital tools? Or are they using digital tools only for preparing their courses? Well, the reality today that it is not much digital teaching is done, especially at school. So there is, of course, a lot of work to be done in that area. So it's a lot about deployment and how we can get that done, which is, of course, complex. You have the level of capillarity. It means you need to reach every teacher in every school anywhere in the European Union. So that requires a huge effort in retraining the skills force, and of course it's question also about teaching with the appropriate methods. I mean, in Luxembourg, where I live, the Luxembourgish schools are going to give an iPad to all the kids, but this is not happening at the European school. So there is a European schooling where the international community of our children have been or are studying or have studied. I mean, today digital technology is not a reality in our European schools. It's a fact. So I think there is a lot of work to be done there on deployment. Of course, all this will not be done in one day and will require a lot of time, but we need to regularly keep fighting so that can come. Now let's move a bit more to the subject of the conference today about MOOCs. So, I mean, for us, the MOOCs has really been a disruptive innovation that has the potential to transform higher education and create new competition and centers of excellence among universities worldwide. So we are absolutely convinced of the the beauty of the instrument. I think that in the figures of the University of Edinburgh has been absolutely outstanding, and the number of people, I think it was about 2,400,000 people signing to those MOOCs. So that, I mean, it's huge. It's many more people signing to MOOCs than students of the university. Well, this is, of course, not only in this sector. I mean, if you go to the cultural heritage sector, where I am more largely involved in, I mean, the number of readers that you have now in the digital tools of any national library, multiply by 100 the people who go physically to the reading room. So this is, of course, the opportunities of the digital world to reach everywhere are there. So we have said it all. I mean, it's about flexibility, it's about personalization, it's about continuous competences, it's the designing a MOOC and a course on topics which are of actuality. I mean, I was I was enjoying the adaptability of the courses around Brexit. So now that Brexit has turned out one way, now we have to start reteaching what we were teaching, because I mean, perhaps some of our assumptions were completely wrong, and now the idea is, how do we understand what happened and why did it happen? So you really have you have the opportunity to be there with courses on topics which are of preoccupation today, and in these areas of work. I mean, I was also quite impressed by the ability of working together with the social networks, MOOCs and Twitter, MOOCs and Facebook. I mean, this is really things that would be difficult to do in standard courses, which sometimes take a bit much more time to adapt. And I think all of us, we know about that. Now let's see also what are the challenges. So I think that one of them is the low completion rates. I think in your figures it was about 7-8%. I think you thought 1,040,000 people were completing and 2,400,000 were signing. So completion rate is an issue. I think it's an issue everywhere. And that does not, I mean, people, of course, that sign get educated, even if they don't complete it. But I think there is an issue there that tackles everybody, and we need to understand why that happened. The concept, of course, of quality control, I think that you were quite clear in the presentation in Edinburgh of how important quality control is and the open university experience. So I think that, of course, is extremely important, that to keep up high quality in all the MOOCs, and that we don't find ourselves in a tsunami of content of very poor quality. So I think that is something very important. E-assessment. So the question is, how do we assess people who do in MOOCs? And there is issues around those who do the tests are the ones who are following the course, or are they somehow being helped, or what's happening there? How we can really be sure that the assessment is well done. Here I think that the Commission is doing some work on the topic, and we have one of our research projects is particularly tackling that issue. How can we assess the content of the students in this point? So that is difficult. The question of business models. So there are some cases of very successful platforms that we all know which are they, but what about others? And what about, I mean, it's the winner takes it all, or can we start developing new platforms that will tackle specialized people? So I think that is really an area. There is also the question about reskilling of our workforce and the population, so MOOCs as part of a university linked to students of university, or MOOCs really targeting vocational training and targeting reskilling of the normal population. And who should be doing that? Universities or the chambers of commerce and all these professional corporations and of association of workers in different professions, that they can also be an active part of that. So I think that is another area in which is extremely important, that, I mean, the opportunity of MOOCs, not only in teaching our students, but also in reskilling all our population and trying to work with them on that. And then, of course, the question of the business model that we need to look at in order to develop a wide offer that we can that we can develop. So those are a bit the general challenges that I think that you all know much more than, but is there where we are really working in the. So how are we working in the Commission around all these things? So for all of those who don't know how the European Commission works, we basically have 3 instruments of work. One is legislation, in which we adopt laws that are subsequently adapted in national legislation. So around 80–85% of all the laws that are produced in a member state, they are discussed in Brussels. They are adopted as European laws and then transposed into national legislation. So the copyright, for example, is an example, but 85% of the laws are discussed. Now we are discussing, for example, around connected cars, autonomous driving. So should we be doing autonomous driving every country on its own, or should we develop a European law that allows to have autonomous cars driving all across Europe? Well, I think we all share that it would probably be much better if we have a common code around Europe on this issue than we have to start with every single country discussing how such a law would be. So those are the first instrument of the Commission, legislation. We don't have legislation in education because it's not our core competence. So when it comes into policy work, I said it before, it's about policy documents and coordination work. Then we have funding, which some of you have been quite active in participating with us. So funding at the level of research programs. So we have been launching some calls on developing new tools for ICT and education. We are currently having a project around the assessment of MOOCs, but we have also been discussing other issues. I will tell you a bit more. What's important in this slide is that there are 2 very important sources of Commission funding that can be used in all these deployment actions, which are the regional funds or the structural funds, which try to help less developed regions, and that less developed regions can make huge use of these funds, for example, to equipping schools with IT, for teaching their teachers for IT, so community fundings from structural funds that are managed nationally and that the different member states can use to tackle these challenges at stake. And the Commission is pushing much more and more these days to soft investments, intangible investments. So this is not about building roads and building airports. It's also about bringing innovation skills, it's about reskilling the populations, and this is a core topic of our community funding. And then you have the European Social Fund. The European Social Fund deals with the social dimension of the European Union. So there, of course, unemployment, reskilling of the population is one of the main endeavors. So anything that is linked to giving training courses and using and trying to reskill our workforce is funded by European Social Fund. So again, you have a huge opportunities, all of you who are working on MOOCs, to try to work within your own country and fight for that type of budgets that come from the European Union and they are very important amounts of money. So the amount of the structural funds is around 25% of the whole of the European Union budget. So this is a huge amount of money that is nationally managed but can be earmarked towards these concepts. And then we have, of course, coordination work. We also have tried to do a lot of work with the people on the different sectors, and we have been doing coordination work with MOOCs. Our colleagues in DG EAC regularly have networks of people that put together people in this sector. They gather them together in Brussels. We also do it in our networks of excellence. So we try really to work with the community because, of course, I mean, the work is done by you. We are, I think it was very well explained, great parasites in all this work. We can try to put forward what is the target, but we need all of you for the deployment. Now, when it comes to what we have been doing a bit more specific, so we have been working in the last years on learning technologies at several levels. So we have been dealing with digital gaming, gamification of teaching. So we have had calls around those areas. We have had calls around technologies for learning and teaching twice. So there we have been funding some projects around MOOCs. I mean, notably, we have funded a project about translation of MOOCs. So this is an issue which, of course, concerns us, and we are very much involved in all the issues around language technologies. My colleague Marco Marcella, who will be here the next 2 days, he's also in charge of the language technologies. But at the end of the question is, if we try to tackle the population, I mean, and we have huge courses in English, but not in the other languages, we have to do something about it. Perhaps in Spanish we are also well done, but in other languages, what is the issue? And if you want to reskill the population, then those workers, I mean, they might not be very familiar in English, and if you are speaking one of the minority languages or one of the languages not widely spoken, well, you are not that much well served. So I think there's also a big opportunity of how on translation of these questions. Of course, machine translation is not perfect, we all know that, but it can be quite an interesting tool to address that. So, I mean, this is improving, and I think there is an area of work to be done there. The Tesla project about how to assess people doing MOOCs and following them. So this is quite an innovative project. Is now being implemented. So we are really starting. So it's about analytics. It's about all the questions that we have mentioned. How we can tackle this question around the assessment of student following MOOCs. So the future. So what will be the future that we are going to be doing in Europe, and where are we moving? So be reassured that the concept of education and skills is one of the big blocks of our work. So certainly in the digital single market, the question of skilling in ICT our population and skilling our population in digital technologies is one of the building blocks of our work, which can only be achieved in cooperation with the member states and mobilizing all sorts of funding from member states, also European fundings, as I said, of the European Social Fund and structural funding. But this is really a core competence, core activity that we are doing at European Youth. The same applies to training the population at large. So innovation capital, our people are our force. I mean, this is behind all the European Commission strategy. And MOOCs are a wonderful opportunity for delivering in this concept. So, of course, we have been doing work around the skills and competences that our children need. And I mean, certainly when I listen and I hear what are the competences about critical thinking, creativity, I mean, of course, I didn't follow that. I have to say that to my previous speakers, Mr. Roshi, that I share all his presentation, apart from the part on statistics and civil engineering. So you can guess what is my core competence. That part I didn't appreciate too much. So we can have a coffee around that. Then, of course, we will continue doing work on research and technology, but here we need you. We need you to support us. So when we come around doing research and technology in Horizon 2020 or in other programs, we face huge competition from our colleagues in other areas. So we have the robotics community supporting robotics, the people supporting the development of high-performance computer, people doing data economy. I mean, and that's me, but if you want to get funding for doing research and coordination work in this area of work, you will have to fight for it. What does it mean that? It means putting together ideas, substantiating them, trying to say where the community should be going, and then fighting together with the people at the national level in every country that are helping us in shaping our work programs to bring the attention of the importance of digital technologies for education. Don't leave that work only to us. Even if Marco and I will fight strongly for that because it's our pitch, it's also your pitch. So you cannot sit there waiting that we do the work for you. You have to be really active. And being active means really arguing why this is important, coming with figures, with impact, with numbers. What are the challenges we have today? Why are we not deploying this better than today? Because we are lacking on this area or that area. I mean, you really have to fight for that. And you have to fight for that at all levels, because competition for funding is huge. Then there are also questions around open data, of course. So the question of MOOCs, massive online open courses, they are there. So I mean, I'm sure that you have also, we will have debates around copyright and other issues around MOOCs. But I mean, at the European Union, we are very much supportive of open data, allowing the possibility of really reusing content, developing new courses, building on what has been done for the benefit of everybody. So be reassured that we will be fighting hard at the European level on education. It is really our future. MOOCs and the work you are doing are an essential building block in all that. There are many challenges, starting of course with deployment, and that is really the area in which we have to improve in all the questions around that we have been discussing. You will have 4 or 5 days the opportunity to discuss all those issues. The questions, of course, of inclusion, that means what about languages that are not English and other populations? What about reskilling our workforce? So MOOCs beyond the university context but to the workforce, another huge opportunity. And please let us know what are the conclusions of this conference. Where should Europe be going? What would be the objectives that we'll be pursuing? And where would you think that our added value could be placed? So we would not like to interfere where we should not be interfering, and we would like to concentrate on the work that we can do better at the European level, pulling out the efforts of everybody, and let's work together for the future in this area. Thank you. There's some minutes for questions. There's one person over there.
Again, Einar Sauerborn from Heidelberg. You said the EU has a very limited role in education, but do you not see a role in standardization? For example, the ECTS, I don't know how it really works. Is this something where you could play a role, including MOOCs in the accreditation process of the ECTS system, European Credit Transfer System?
Well, I think that standardization and is part of what we could call coordination work. So it is, we have been doing things. I mean, we have been working at European level in the Bologna process, for example. I mean, so this has nothing to do with MOOCs, but it's just to tell you that member states can pull together in that. I think all that is one of the areas of coordination that can be done. But it will be the communities who have to tell us what sort of standards they would need, who should be developing the standard. Will the standard be followed? Because I mean, these things are not easy subjects. And on standards, we have seen all sorts of things in the European level. We have a standardization programs, and we are working very much regularly on that. But perhaps, Marco, have we been supporting concrete projects on standards?
Yes. Yes.
I was sure.
And then a number of levels. I mean, from the technological point of view, when you want to harmonize learning contexts, especially those that are going into the MOOCs platform. However, I think that the question here was more on a policy level as to whether accreditations and on the role of MOOCs within the CTS. So it's the standardizations of the credit transfers with MOOCs. I think that our colleagues in DG Education and Culture are looking at the matter. I do not know whether there is a specific intention, but this is just because of lack of knowledge. However, it would be interesting to see how the field is going to evolve if the digital technology, let's say, gets a more prominent role in education and in higher education. So I think that there it's a matter really of coordinations with the member states, because that is not a competence which is being handed over to our colleagues in Brussels.
Hello. I'm Jorge Beira. I work for FCT, and we are actually one of the participants on ICT 22, and we are working with you on that bid. And I have many experiences with trying to get funding from European processes, although on national level. And I do think that there is a mismatch on KPIs that are requested for projects and the fact that we can deliver them. So on MOOCs, for instance, they usually ask us patents. You know, how many patents are your project going to produce? Or sometimes they ask us for dropouts on K-12, although MOOCs are much higher on, your life learning process. Okay, so I think that there are a mismatch on KPIs when asked on projects.
Well, I mean, I cannot speak of what are the requests that you have been asked at national level in this country for the work you're doing on those KPIs.
Well, I assume that they are asking the KPIs that the European Commission asks also. So, no? Maybe that's a national problem.
Well, I cannot, I don't think we ask about KPIs in particular. I mean, we are basically, with our communication, showing what we consider to be key policies. When we talk about the structural funds or the European social funds, what the European Commission does is to set up a sort of a charter of projects that could be potentially be funded. So we are there basically saying that projects that are, for example, dealing with the deployment of ICT technologies in a certain area could be eligible for funding, but we leave it there. And then it will be the member states that will have to decide whether that would be one of their priorities and how they want to select projects from there. So I think that there is a work to be done probably for those at national level who are dealing with those funds, and perhaps there has to be an understanding of how that works, and perhaps you have to come upstream to try to tell them how these projects should be measured, rather than they being used in the standard KPIs for whatever.
Okay, thank you.
I think that we have...
Thank you.
You are mastering... One more question? Okay.
Yeah. My name is Mauro Calisi. I'm from the University of Naples, Federico II. And we have been benefiting for Europe in two ways. So, structural funds, and I strongly endorse your proposition, and it's also my, I will say, advice to the Portuguese colleague, of course, can be very important. And we're also being coordinating EMMA, which is European Multiple MOOC Segregator, coming directly from Brussels. Now, in spite of all of this, as a political scientist, I strongly appreciate what you said in the beginning, that this is not a core, competence or policy for EU. But still, the main question remains, a lot of what you see around being developed here in this room, and namely what was introduced by our colleague at Edinburgh, can be distributed thanks to American platform. I have nothing against that. It's beautiful and we're doing this and I think it's a great opportunity. But still, is there not a way that you could take as the European Union a stronger, how would you say, policy vision with respect to what it is happening? This is a subfield which is already very mature. We all know what it is happening around. But is there not a possibility that EU comes with stronger instructions, even, for instance, for the structural funds? Because, it was not easy for us to find a way. We were successful. And in a way, this is such an important chance that I'm wondering whether you see this possibility or you simply cannot do it because, as you said in the beginning very clearly to us, this is not a core competence for the EU. Thank you for your frankness.
Well, your question is very political, and it comes at a very right moment. So, for those of you who have been following what's happening at the European Union level, our President, Mr. Juncker, issued in the month of March a white paper of the future of Europe. Of course, this is very much linked to Brexit. asking the member states and what they think the European Union should be doing. And they presented on top of the table 5 scenarios. So he didn't take any political choice. He basically said that the European Union could be doing only work on the single market, or should be doing many more things together. Those are the 2 extremes. Some member states may have the opinion that the European Union should only be doing the single market. But if we say we are only going to be doing the single market, forget all the research programs that we are doing, forget all the structural funds, because cohesion will not be a policy, for example. If we choose to do many more things together, well, one of those more things together that could be done, apart from areas, of course, around the euro, could be around education, that today is not a core competence. So that discussion is on the table, and now there have been different debates, and that will be continued until the month of September. In the month of September, our President, Mr. Juncker, he goes to the European Parliament and delivers his State of the Union speech. It's always done in the first week or second week of September, and there he will probably already signal how he thinks that the European Union should be going. There has a new president elected in France 2 weeks ago. He met with Mrs. Merkel last week in Germany, and they also proposed some vision. But those are 2 member states, and we are today 28. We will be 27, unfortunately, in 2 years' time. That will be a corporate decision. Now, this is the politically correct answer. Now, my personal opinion, I don't think that will happen. If you want now the European Union to do more in the area of education, that is a non-flyer. We are doing already too many things. We have been criticized by that, and I don't see any possibilities of the European people from Brussels telling someone in a school in Bari or in Calabria or in a University of Calabria how they should be doing the work. Honestly, I don't think that is going to happen. And I'm not sure that would be a good idea. What we have to do is that we try to put some sort of political documents and some coordination documents that, in a way, are the joint work of the education community with, of course, some political choices from the European Commission. This is discussed with the cultural ministers and with education ministers, that they can also issue some conclusions. And there you have a clear political vision. Now it's up to the people and to the different universities and education people to follow those ideas, use those ideas, and build on those ideas. But subsidiarity principle, I think, is very, very much enshrined in this area, and honestly, I don't think that we will be more prescriptive at the European level. I don't think that is at all a realistic or a possible scenario. I try to be honest with you. I don't think we will be doing more on this, but we don't want to do less. So we want to continue doing our work in this area, trying to show things and trying to keep the momentum. And as I say, I mean, you can count that you will have some work from the European Commission which will underpin the work you are doing at your level. And for sure, we'll try to give you all the necessary arguments on which you can build further work.